A little over a year ago, we made a series of videos where we talked through the landscape of native Windows development. We explored all the available technology, Windows Forms, UWP, WPF, and even .NET MAUI. Another technology we looked at was WinUI, which at the time was touted as the new way of building Windows applications. Now, at the time, although UWP was a great technology, it had been designed to be a Windows platform only technology, essentially, was tightly coupled to the actual version of the operating system, and ran on a version of .NET that was incompatible with all other normal .NET Core binaries. This meant going through awkward machinations if you needed to leverage any pre-existing code. Per statements from Microsoft, WinUI was meant to solve for these scenarios. However, we found that it simply was not ready for prime time, as the development story was half-baked, to say the least. Fast forward a year or so later, and what we want to do in this video is showcase WinUI now to see if the police line do not cross sentiment that we had back then still applies today. Stay tuned. So what we're going to do here is we are going to start by looking at UWP, and you can see that it's basically not available anymore. Now, it's not that it's totally gone. I would imagine that you can still, install it. So honestly, they might just be gone forever. But in any case, when we go to the desktop, you see that we've got WinForms, we got WPF, and what we're going to be doing in this video is we're going to basically be creating a WinUI 3 application. And I'm going to quickly create a location to put this app. So we'll call it WinUI 3 2025. And we basically create the project. And the first thing we're going to do is just go through and check out, just starting from scratch. If you start the project, does it build? Can we build it? I mean, it seems silly to say, but the last time we did this, we actually had a hard time even getting it to build or getting it to run. It was just all over the place. Okay, it does seem that it does build properly this time, and let's see if we can run it. And there we go, we can run it, and we can click and interact with it. Let's try that again. Hopefully there's no issue. And second time's the charm, works perfectly fine, no issue. So with that working, let's go ahead and let's kind of augment this a bit. What we're gonna do is we're going to, first of all, change the orientation to vertical, and you're seeing that right there. The IntelliSense is not picking it up, but the second time around it does pick it up just fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to basically create a counter and just increment it, and then just display the incremented amount. So I'm going to do some string interpolation here. And when we run this, we should get our basic counting, which just counts up. Nothing big, no big deal here. So we now know that the general application works and does what it's supposed to do. This was a issue last time, so we're just gonna modify it a bit to make it a little bit cleaner. And I'm actually doing this while the application is running. So I just changed the width. Now I'm gonna stretch the button. As you can see, still running up there. I'm still able to click on it, and that all works. So it's pretty stable thus far. See, I can change the text of the button so that it has so it has more clear because we're going to create other buttons in this stack. So in app test, and then we're actually going to go in the code again, and we're going to change the code behind. So this is different from changing the XAML. This is actually changing the code behind, and save. Now we go back to it, and as you can see, when we click in, it's actually dynamically updated it, and we're able to see the numbers change. So a lot more stable, a lot more stable than it was last time. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add a class library. This is going to be a regular .NET class library that we're going to add. And there's something interesting about the templates that you'll see in a second. I didn't want to change it ahead of time. We're going to create this new class library here, .NET 9. And then we're actually going to go in and let's change this to some, call it something better. General functionality. I'm going to change the class as well. And let's create a static value in there, like a field. And we'll just create a static function as well that just increments and returns the field. And it's probably superfluous to make the count public, but whatever, in case we want to do some different things, I'm just going to leave it like that for now. Okay, so we've got that done there. And we're going to add the project. So we're going to add basic class library, and you'll see the issue here. So when we add it, you can see over here that basically it is showing that there's an error with the dependency. And basically, the issue here is that when you create the template, it basically creates it as a .NET 8 project. So you typically have to upgrade it to .NET 9 in order for this to start working. When I try to build here, you see it's basically telling me that there's an issue, that I'm running .NET 8 when I should be using .NET 9. And I can go in here and I can actually look at the application, and you see over there that it's showing .NET 8. So I switch it to .NET 9, save it. And now when I rebuild, everything all works now. The errors have disappeared, and it's now compatible. So this ability to just use regular class libraries, not some special class library, is actually quite huge. Because if you worked with the, UWP before, you know that you would have to use a UWP specific class library or a Metro specific class library. And they even had this sort of like intermediate library project, this shared project that you could create so that you could share files or share functionality by putting it in the shared library and let it build both as a native framework and as a modern, as a UWP framework. So that's changed now. I can just reference the class library. And what I'm doing here is I'm basically just creating the code that's going to leverage that. And instead of using the basic counter, it's actually going to call that external functionality. And since increment returns a new value, we don't need the basic anymore. It looks like I have an issue here. I don't have a close parenthesis, close quotes. So I just close that, and then that should take care of that so that I'm able to build. Okay, so let's see if we can do some more of that in-app editing. So I'm going to go in here and, well, first of all, let's properly name this. And then we're also going to need to add some margins to these buttons so that there's a little bit of space between them. So I'm going to add a margin 5. And I'm just going to replicate that beneath. We need to go back and change the code behind so that it's referencing the right button. It's right now referencing a different button. So let's build that again. So there, so in-app works fine. Class library works absolutely fine. So moral of the story, you can also reference native .NET Core libraries, .NET, whatever, as long as the library you're referencing, I think is a lower version of .NET Core, like 5 to whatever, you should be good. So let's now take it one step further and let's reference a WinForms library. So a WinForms library would theoretically allow us to be able to pop up forms or leverage capability that's hidden behind WinForms. So again, in my previous application that I developed it using UWP, and it was a point of sale application, and I needed to use the printing capabilities from WinForms, and it required me creating services and an HTTP endpoint, a local endpoint that I would have to share post data to, and all kinds of hoops to jump through just to basically leverage that capability. So let's see what happens. Are we able to just natively leverage it? I've now created a .NET 9 WinForms application, and I've added a new form called test form to it. So in here, I'm going to use the toolbox and basically see, where's the toolbox? Okay, there it is down there. It's been a long time since I've seen the toolbox. So I'm going to drag and drop a label. Let's find a label, drag it here. Right, so now I'm basically adding the WinForm library to my WinUI application. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something interesting here. First of all, let me just finish configuring this so it all lines up. In this case, I'm actually going to try and call out to the WinForm from my WinUI application and have the functionality execute within the WinForm. Now, you can always pretty much do whatever you want because a modern day .NET Core WinForm application is just a .NET Core. It's just .NET Core code, right? So it's just gonna run whether it's a library or anything else. So WinForms library test form, right, equals new. There we go. So I'll open that again and let's go over to the events tab of the properties. There we go, and I'll just get rid of that, and that should get rid of the code behind. There we have it. So now in here, I'm going to add a public function that I'm going to be calling from my WinUI application. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this whole thing. There's no reason for me to even, this is basically the capability I want to replicate. So I'm going to paste that here and remove the static stuff from it. So we don't want it to be static. And we don't want that guy to be static as well. And then it does not actually need a return type, does it? So let's get rid of that. And so no return. And what we really want to do is we want the label, which I think is label 1, the text for the label to be equal to the change in count. Then over here, well, because we're going to be doing incrementing and maintaining the state, we're going to probably need to store the state somewhere. And then we're going to have to check to see if we've already created it. If we haven't created it, it creates it the first time. And if we have created it, then it just calls that method. Well, we instantiated, but we didn't show. So let's add a show to this. Okay, so now we click it the first time. There it opens it. And we click it additional times. And as you can see, it is changing it in the WinForm itself, right? So our code in our WinUI application is able to change values and control things in the WinForm. So you might imagine that you have some kind of application that is a modern application, but like in my example with the POS, there are things that you need from WinForms. You can use it directly there, or maybe even if you need uh, basically for whatever reason you want WinForms to be the UI for a specific piece. Maybe there are some controls that are in WinForms that you have to leverage. Well, now you can do that. So then the final test is let's go ahead and let's do the same thing and let's do it for a WPF control library. So we're going to also do the same thing, essentially reference it and basically make calls from WinUI that change values inside of the referenced library. So I'm also going to use a label. I'm going to horizontally and vertically align it. And I think I'm going to maybe, let's call it test text. Maybe I'm going to make the font size a little bit larger. First of all, make the background color white so we can see it here. And then in here, let's go ahead and let's do the same thing. So we're going to have a private count, and then we're going to have a public increment that will basically increment the value of count and display that value in the label. So notice that label in WPF doesn't have text. Basically use content in WPF. Okay, so we're good to go. And now let's go back over to our WinUI and let's add this WPF control library so we can see it. And we're going to go into our code here. So I'm just going to rename this. User control, and you should be spotting something here that I'm doing that is not going to work for the use case that I've specified, but I'll keep quiet till I actually bump into it. So you can see, so I'm adding it all here, and obviously we're going to change it to WPF control library, and it's user control 1, and we do that, and there we have it. We've bumped into it now, which is that we're using a user control. We're not using a form or a window. A user control is a UI that's inside of something else, right? So actually, what we need to do is change this user control into a window, right? So I'm going to call it test window, and we're going to have to go and change pretty much everything in here to make it line up. Let's go over here. We wanted to extend window, and we're going to name this test window, and we need to change the constructor. And then back in the XAML, we need to change the type, the class name to be test window. And that should be it. So that's all lined up. And now when we go back to our WinUI, we just change it to test window. And then so now let's add the button for you. And let's change the click event handler to point to that guy. Let's change the button label. Okay, so we have our new button. When we click that guy, there we have the user interface for the window in WPF. And as I click, you can see that the count is updating. And I can even open the WinForms and click that. I can click the class library. And of course, we know that the application within itself, it works just fine. Another thing to look at is, well, the integration for publishing. And as you can see, you do have your package manifest available to you. The ability to basically publish applications or configure your applications. You have the ability to publish whatever application you have as a native application to a folder. And you also have, if you go down, the ability to package and publish. And in there, you can see that you can actually associate it with the store or create an app package, whatever it is you need to do. Final bit on the subject, you cannot host WinForms or WPF controls inside of your WinUI application, although you're able to fire off windows into those applications. They are fundamentally still leveraging different technology to do what they do. So if you want to leverage the capabilities that exist inside of WinForms or WinUI, your choices are to use the code behind, meaning use the underlying functionality, or open those applications or those forms or windows and then have the user interact within those windows. You're not going to be able to take that behavior and embed it into your WinUI application very easily, if at all. So just keep that in mind as you go on your journey. With that being said, as always, we who are about to code salute you.